Hello, I'm Sue Armstrong. I'm Dan Armstrong's wife and a fellow minister. We've spent the last 55 years of our life sharing the good news of the gospel with people all over the world. We've especially have a special love for Australia. We've been to almost every state and every corner of every state in this nation. And we've met the most wonderful people who've blessed our lives, and we've been able to do a lot of encouraging people for their walk with the Lord. And also we're evangelists, so we love nothing better than seeing people coming forward and yielding their life to Jesus. The greatest joy in ministry is to see somebody go from darkness and into light, from death into life. And we've been so blessed in our lives to see so many people. It still makes me a bit teary every time I see someone yielding their life to the Lord. It's such a wonderful experience for them and, for those all around them. We're part of a ministry that we formed ourselves called Kairos Ministries, which Kairos just means God's special, anointed, appointed time. We have a very strong ministry in the area of the Holy Spirit, and we believe that the Holy Spirit has a time and a place for everything. And we have to know that time and know when we're in that time. And when that time is there, we know that the Holy Spirit is going to just move in and do beautiful things in people's lives. So I could tell you about lots of things, but I thought I might just take you for a little night in the desert. Most of you probably have never been out into the central desert of this nation. You might have been to Ayers Rock, so you know a little bit about it, but we leave Ayers Rock and we travel hours and hours into the Pitjantjatjara lands. Some of them are attached to the Rock people, but there are 4 communities going right from Ayers Rock right out to the West Australian border, the first one, Pitjantjatjara, coming back east and to Ernabella and Fregon and Mimili and Indalkina. And we've come to love these people, and we're now family. We've been going there for so long that they've given us we're in skin groupings. They've given us names. They've given us places in their lives. I have a number of mothers in these places. They're not just one mother. I can have a number of mothers, and it's so lovely to have these people. I lost my own mother when I was 23, but I've got a lot of mothers out in Aboriginal communities, and so it's really a lovely place to go. And people sometimes say to us when we're leaving, "Oh, you poor things, you're going out into the desert." And we just laugh because they have no idea how precious our time out there is and how special the people are. They have such a deep spirituality. The moment we enter the communities, they bring the sick to us. They drag them in, they carry them in, and they believe that they're going to be healed. And we see amazing healings. We see amazing acts of God in people's lives because they believe and they know that He's real. And they don't have all the clutter that we have. Their lives are very simple. They don't own anything. They don't have any great ambition to be anything except someone's cousin or uncle or grandmother. That's their greatest ambition in life, to be good at that. And we sometimes think they're lazy because they don't want to work or they don't want to do the things that we do, but they have a whole different system of priorities that are so beautiful because they're all far more like the early church than we are. It's just about hanging out together, loving one another. Not that they always love one another, they're human beings, but that's their aim, and that's what they want in life. And so they're lovely people to be with. They make us so welcome. I just want to take you, I thought I'd just take you they've had a lot of special nights out there. I could write a book on just nights in the desert, maybe I should. But on one particular night, and it was very cold, it was an Easter, and we were out in the desert, and most of the activity happens at night because the days are very hot. But at night there's a beautiful, beautiful desert breeze comes through. It's cool, and you have never seen stars until you've been out into the desert. They are just amazing. The sky is just alive with stars, and it's so clear, even though it's often very cold. But as soon as we go out, we notice that the people have gone ahead of us, and they've made little fires all around the meeting place. Sometimes I've counted up to 9 fires, and we sit around those fires, so we're not cold. And the dogs have priority; they get the best places around the fire. and then the kids get the next best, and then we have to have what's left. But even with that, it's so lovely. They all sit around, and if they've got puppies, the women stick the puppies up under their jumper to keep them warm and to keep the puppies warm. And everyone's happy. We just sit around those fires and we listen to the music and in the worship. And this particular night was just a precious night. We came, it was very, very cold. There were 9 fires going, and there was a huge number of dogs. I always count the dogs and tell my children at home how many dogs went to the meeting. There would have been 17 or 18 dogs, I suppose, at the meeting. And we were just waiting to see what God was going to do. And the day before this particular night, there'd been a death. A little girl, a young 12-year-old girl, had died on a care flight on her way to Alice Springs, and the community was in really deep mourning. And we'd just arrived, and this is with God's time, of course. This is what Kairos time is. It's God's special time. We just arrived there as they were all coming into the school ground in order to... they come together when someone dies, and they have what they call a hearing ceremony, where everyone hears at the same time what's happened. So that's rather sensible, because it means that there are no rumours then. They all hear it. And so we happened to be in the school ground then, and so we joined all the mourners, and we processed past the family where we had to acknowledge their grief and acknowledge our grief because of their grief. And so we did this as we went past, and we hugged them and we prayed for them, and we just felt this incredible sense of belonging to them. And as when it was over, they just left, and they quietly went down into the riverbed, empty riverbed, and that's where they stay. That's their sorry camp. And they stay there until such times as it's time to actually take the coffin and finish the ceremony with the burial of the coffin. They spend numbers of days, sometimes even numbers of weeks, in that sorry camp, and they don't come out. Once they go into that camp, they stay there until the mourning is over. And so they all went, and we were a bit sad because we'd just come into the community and this large number of people were just going away. But anyway, we understood that that's what they had to do. And they had a little school activity going on at the same time in the school, and we were watching that, and as we were watching it, these 2 naughty donkeys came wandering into the school grounds. I haven't had much to do with, well, real donkeys anyway, but these 2 donkeys came in, and they were just causing havoc. They were knocking bins over and getting food. They were pushing things around, and the people were trying to get them out of the school grounds. But I've heard that donkeys are stubborn, that that no amount of even smacking or pushing or kicking would move these donkeys. They stayed, and I thought to myself, these donkeys really run this community. They just do what they like. And I thought no more about them until the next night, and we were sitting around, and the meeting was going on. We were singing and worshipping, and before Dan preached, we looked up. There was a lot of sounds of people coming after everyone had seemed to have arrived, and this great crowd of people arrived, and we realised they were people from the sorry camp, and they had left their sorry camp to come to our meeting. And so we called them out the front, and we called the people around them. We prayed again for them, and then to honour us, they got up on the platform and they sang a beautiful song to us, and to just say how much they appreciated our being there at this sad time in their lives. And then they sat down and joined the meeting, and Dan got up to give the message, and he'd no sooner started the message, and all the dogs and the children were asleep, so it was all very quiet, and he got up to start the message, and he'd only just started into it when one of those naughty donkeys wandered into the meeting. And I went, oh no, this donkey will ruin the meeting. The dogs will go ballistic. They'll be up and barking and chasing them, and they'll chase them through the hot fires, and people will have to get up, and because that's what happens. And nobody moved. The dogs didn't move. The dogs were sound asleep. The donkey came up to the platform, stood facing Dan, immediately fell in love with his very bright Australian jumper that he was wearing, and was just fixated on him, didn't move, just stood staring at him. So Dan realised this was a very special moment, and so he started talking to the donkey. And he said, hello. He said, I'm so glad you're here, he said, because I know some things about you. I know that somehow, like Jesus, you've suffered great rejection. And the donkey put his head to one side and he said, sometimes you've been misunderstood. And he put his head to the other side, listening, looking up at this colourful Australian standing up there on the platform. And then Dan said to him, you know, on your back you've got the sign of the cross. Those of you who don't know, if you look at the back of a donkey, they've got a distinct cross on their back. And he said that's because Jesus chose the most humble and the most unworthy, by earthly standards, of animals to carry him when he was alive on the earth. It was a donkey that he chose above everything else. So you are a very precious animal. This donkey was just overcome. He stood and stared at him. And then he just suddenly just turned his head and he just trotted off outside the gate and put his head just over the fence that was around the meeting area. And for the rest of the meeting, he didn't move. He listened to every word the preacher made. And the people were just so amazed at this little donkey, the lessons that came, because sometimes they feel like they're the last people on earth, that they're shunned and they're rejected and they're not worth anything by the standards of this nation. And here was this little donkey, all of those things, and yet God put the sign of the cross on him and allowed him to carry himself, to take that trust position and to be carrying the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And to them, they got that message. Aboriginal people love stories and they always know where those stories are going because that's the way they relate their own stories. And so we had this amazing night, and at the end of the night, the people came out, the fires were getting a little bit slow, and the people, some of the young people who'd lit the fires came and they picked up these sticks that lie alongside the fire, and they went out and they lit the fires that were burning brightly. They took the brand and they took it and they put the fire into the other fires that were going out, and they began to blaze up again. And as they did this, Dan reminded them of the revival on Elcho Island. The people in the desert are very good friends now with the Elcho Island people because through our ministry there, they've been part of the ministry to the desert people. And he reminded them that when the revival went through Elcho Island, there was a vision, and the vision was that all these fire sticks were on the ground and this big fire was going, and the people on the island went and they picked up those sticks and they lit them and they took them all across Arnhem Land. They got in boats and they took them over to the mainland. They took them down through to the east coast. They took them over to the west coast. They took them down through the centre. This was a prophecy that God was going to take the people of Arnhem Land to all of those places, and over the years to come, he did that. And he called on the young people to come and to be carriers of the fire and to be firebrands to the rest of the Pirinjara lands and out to the Aranda people and over to the Walbury people and so forth. And these young people came in response to that. And it was just one of those precious nights where we knew that God was present and that he was pleased with this meeting and that people were touched by the Holy Spirit. And afterwards there were people coming out for prayer for all sorts of things in their lives that needed to be changed. And there was a great sense of expectation and encouragement in their hearts that God would use them to take those firebrands out and to be part of the healing of this nation. What a night. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And it was just one of the many precious times we have spent in the Pirinjara lands with the people of the desert.